just heard the automated, this meeting's being recorded.
Hi everyone, I'll give people an opportunity to log on and we'll start in a minute or so. But it's lovely for you all to be joining us here today. Numbers are creeping up, so I'll just give it the 30 seconds or so. Okay, they seem to have flattened out, so let's get started. So good afternoon and welcome to today's virtual information webinar on congenital myotonic dystrophy. This week it was International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day, so it is a great pleasure to be running this webinar today. So I'm Neeru Nayak, I'm Director of Services and Support at MD UK, and I'm chairing today's session along with my colleague Dr. Lorna Simpson, MD UK's Research Officer. Throughout this webinar, if you do have any questions about the session content, or you're welcome to get in touch with us, either of us directly, or Milad, who is also doing the admin for this webinar today. So we're delighted you could join us for what promises to be an informative and valuable session. We have a very packed agenda this afternoon with an array of fantastic speakers. So we're going to split the session in two, beginning with a discussion on research and a chance to ask any questions you might have on that topic. And then we will move into a discussion about living with congenital myotonic dystrophy, where we'll have a general discussion and focus on answering your questions. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try and cover as many as we can, also including those submitted in advance. Unfortunately, we won't be able to invite people to speak directly, but we'll make sure questions are brought into the discussion during the webinar. And if we're unable to answer any questions during the session, we'll aim to follow up afterwards and share information on our website. While we're doing our best to cover as much as possible, some specific or personal questions may be better addressed by your clinical team or neuromuscular specialist. This session is intended to provide general information and does not replace individual medical advice. So a reminder that our helpline is available for support for anyone affected by muscle wasting and weakening conditions. Whether you have a question, need advice, or are looking for support, we're here and the team is here to help. You can reach us on our free phone line that should be on your screens, 0800 652 6352, or at info@musculardystrophyuk.org. Today's webinar is being recorded and the video of it will be available on our website in the coming days or potentially early next week. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, PTC Therapeutics and Lupin Healthcare, for supporting today's virtual webinar. While they have generally sponsored this event, they have no control over its content or influence on its proceedings. So my colleague Lorna will be chairing the first part of today's session. And to start us off this afternoon, Lorna will introduce her first speakers. Over to you, Lorna. Thank you.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. So I'm delighted to be chairing the research part of today's session and to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Nikoleta Nikolenko. So Nikoleta is a Doctor of Rehabilitation Medicine and a Senior Clinical Research Associate at University College London. She's actively involved in research relating to myotonic dystrophy, and this afternoon she'll be talking to us about some recent research in the field of congenital DM. As Neeru mentioned, we'll have time for a Q&A session after the end of the presentation. So if you have any research-related questions, please submit these using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So thank you for joining us today, Nikoleta. I'll hand over to you now to start your presentation whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Let me just start the presentation. Can you view my slides?
Yes, we can see them. They're not on view mode yet.
Is that okay?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
So I will start this presentation, which I will discuss about advances in research in congenital myotonic dystrophy. So these are my disclosures. And this is not an empty screen. It's an animation that I'm going to try to show you that we have created with the help of QRDM. Which shows about the myotonic dystrophy in general, taking into consideration all different symptom onsets of the condition. Can you hear it?
The volume probably needs to be higher. I heard it for a second.
We work with people with myotonic dystrophy at Queen Square Hospital in London. Myotonic dystrophy type 1, or DM1, is a rare progressive neuromuscular disease.
DM1 is caused by an inherited dominant genetic mutation, meaning that the gene comes from an affected parent. DM1 affects most body systems. We will introduce you to some people living with DM1 to help you understand more about this condition.
Tom has late adult onset DM1, meaning symptoms appear after the age of 45.
I developed cataracts and had them removed. I didn't know I had DM1 until my grandchild was diagnosed with congenital myotonic dystrophy. Subsequently, I got tested, even though I thought I didn't have any symptoms.
Nadia has adult onset DM1, meaning symptoms started appearing between the ages of 18 and 45.
Apologies for that. I have difficulty staying awake. When I was 19, my hands would lock and I struggled releasing my grip. Later, my hands became weaker. I developed a skin tumour. I have upsetting and embarrassing bowel problems. With time, I developed an irregular heartbeat. After being followed up with manual ECGs, I was told I needed a pacemaker, but I didn't have any heart symptoms such as paralysis or blackouts. I fall asleep during the day sometimes. I wake up with headaches and often feel sleepy in the morning. I also cough while eating, sometimes choke. I struggle with heavy periods because of fibroids. Recently had a hysterectomy. I avoid walking long distances as I get tired easily. I trip frequently, sometimes fall.
Jenny has childhood onset DM1, meaning symptoms began between the ages of 1 month and 18 years. I was tested because my doctor noticed I had difficulty releasing my grip. According to Mom, I was late to walk and sweet. I always had difficulty with reading, writing fast, and needed extra support. I used to fall asleep during classes. I have chest infections and need to take antibiotics. This is Ivy, who is 5, and her mother Olivia. And this is Peter, who is 16, and his foster parent Leo.
Ivy and Peter have congenital myotonic dystrophy, or CDM. CDM symptoms usually show at birth within the first month of life.
Peter and Ivy have difficulty speaking, so we'll talk to Olivia and Leo.
I was diagnosed with CDM at birth. Me and my dad Tom, is were diagnosed too. Ivy was poorly at birth. She was floppy and had feet turned in. She was put in an incubator because she struggled with breathing and eating. Ivy needs support walking.
Sorry, I don't know what's happening.
Playing at the CND support at school.
Children with CDM may experience the development of the disease in different ways.
Hi, I'm Pete's foster parent. Pete had similar symptoms as Ivy at birth, later in life, but was diagnosed a few years ago. He's non-verbal, so he communicates using Macaton or a tablet. Peter struggles with swallowing. Has his food from a tube in his tummy. His condition deteriorated as he got older, so now he uses a wheelchair. He cannot control his bladder and bowel, so wears pads or pull-ups to help. He has a pacemaker to control his heart. And Peter is more affected by illnesses because his breathing was.
As you can see, myotonic dystrophy is complex. Everyone is different, as are the symptoms they experience. It's important to get diagnosed early so we can help you stay as healthy as possible and deal with any problems.
Myotonic dystrophy progresses over time, and whilst we cannot stop this, we can help with symptom management. Groups and charities can also help with advice and support, so please do reach out.
Hello.
So I have added some information about further information about DM1 and congenital myotonic dystrophy in general. This is because a lot of information that are present in the web are quite overwhelming for patients with myotonic dystrophy, and also it's really difficult for many patients to understand more complicated scientific language. You can find more information about this condition in several websites, including the Muscular Dystrophy UK, which has an updated information on pediatric onset myotonic dystrophy type 1, as well as myotonic dystrophy type 1, and as well as the MDF Foundation, which has a lot of information about the clinical care considerations in both myotonic dystrophy type 1 adult onset, and as well as the pediatric onset of myotonic dystrophy type 1. Most of it has been translated in different languages, so it can be helpful for patients that they travel abroad as well. And also includes a lot of information about other aspects of the disease, such as cardiovascular. It includes anesthetic guidelines, and also other information such as even recipes for patients with swallowing difficulties. Another place that you can also visit is the MDSG webpage as well, and you can contact them and they can send leaflets about different symptoms in myotonic dystrophy that you might find that you are concerned with. And they also have as well a hotline that patients with myotonic dystrophy sometimes they reach out if they have some kind of concern. So some information about research in myotonic dystrophy. So firstly, I would like to mention the patient surveys that many of you have been completing in the past few years, and highlight how important these surveys are, not only for development of new treatments, but improving how care is delivered as well. Research shows that surveys can provide insights and very valuable insights into patient experience. They reveal where healthcare services are doing well and where they need additional improvements. They also can help both clinician and industry to design better and more effective interventions. This is a very important, especially in rare diseases where there's a limited information in literature, and there has to be a very prompt decision in which kind of information they should use in clinical trials. So this is an example of how the posters look like, which we have presented in previous meetings. These posters they have been presented in IDMC many years ago, and I think to 2022, and the other one in 2024. And the second one, which is the 2024, was a three-year-old follow-up study. So what they present is basically we found that the pediatric onset in DM1 is geographically widespread around the UK, which often leads in late or misdiagnosis. The data highlight the heterogeneity of symptoms, disease progression, and access to specialist care by the pediatric onset of myotonic dystrophy. Some services such as neurology and cardiology are better accessed, but whilst others such as gastroenterology and pain management are underserved, even though there are many patients that have shown symptoms in these areas. Also, another important factor is that the study shows a paternal inheritance in the first study that was done earlier of 9.6% and 8% in the 3-year follow-up study, supporting the fact that it's important to educate both males and females in the inheritance risk when family planning. This is a recent study by QRDM that was posted in their website. You can find the QR code on the right if you want to read about it later on. According to this survey, there are significant differences between congenital and childhood onset DM1 in terms of treatment needs and hospitalizations over hospitalizations. Over the past year, approximately 57.4% of the patients with congenital myotonic dystrophy and 47.6% of those with childhood onset said they needed treatment of some kind of symptom or disorder. When it comes to hospital admissions, those with congenital myotonic dystrophy had more in the last 12 months. That's around 41% of those patients that went to hospital compared to 20% of childhood onset cases. Findings from such surveys can guide the planning, design, and participant recruitment in clinical trials. And later on in this presentation, we will revisit the survey so that you can see exactly how the industry can use this kind of information to develop treatments that benefit the whole population. So in this slide, you can see some of the natural history studies that currently take place, and one that has already been completed. Natural history studies are studies that do not involve any interventions, but collect data over time to understand disease progression while also trying to find meaningful outcome measures that can be used in clinical and research trials. All patients that have completed the Aspire DM1 and the TREAT CDM have been given the opportunity to enroll to the TREAT extension. So the TREAT extension is basically the extension of the first two natural history studies. And this kind of fun extension, this extension will allow to collect even more valuable data over much more years. So there is the last one, the last one, which is the NDM1. It's the adult DM1 natural history study that is currently ongoing, and it has two sites in the UK. The first one is the UCLH, and the second one is in St. George's. This includes any onset of myotonic dystrophy. However, patients need to be able to consent in order to be enrolled in this study. So this slide is about the second study, the second natural history study that was showed that it has already been completed, the TREAT CDM. The study included 47 out of the 100 initially proposed congenital myotonic dystrophy patients around a few sites. As you can see from the baseline characteristics table on the right, almost half of the patients that were recruited in this study were in the age group of 3 to 6 year olds. And 35% had CTG repeat less than 1,000. Respiratory assistance was required by at approximately 2.7 years of age, and abnormal ECGs were found in 13% of these patients, showing that the population was on the milder side of the congenital myotonic dystrophy spectrum. If you look at the figure on the left, you will see that there is significant difference in performance in 6-minute walk test and grip strength test in congenital myotonic dystrophy in comparison to age-matched normal control groups. Also, the authors have suggested that the most visible measures that they have noticed in this study that could be used in future clinical trials would be the 6-minute walk test, the 10-meter walk test, and the 4-stair climb test. The CARE CDM is a study that has been funded by MD UK. This is a cohort study. So a cohort study in comparison to a natural history study, it's only done, it's still a non-interventional study. However, it's only done on a specific, there's only one visit involved. It's not done over a period of many years as in another natural history study. In the CARE CDM, we were investigating the cardiorespiratory system of adult congenital myotonic dystrophy patients. The aim was to improve the care considerations by including some information about congenital myotonic dystrophy, as they have been treated so far based to the adult DM1 care considerations. Results of this study have been shared already at an earlier ENMC international workshop on congenital behavioral abnormalities in cognitive behavioral abnormalities in pediatric myotonic dystrophy population. So what we found from this study is that a lot of patients have several phobias and sensitivities that will make difficult to conduct some clinical assessments, and there should be some considerations from clinicians and from medical personnel in order to be able to provide the best care possible to these patients. For example, many patients, they have problems with needles, which is called trypanophobia. They are really scared of needles, many of the congenital myotonic dystrophy patients. There are ways around it. We have found that there are some, they are keen for some medical or nursing personnel to perform such interventions. So we try to accommodate accordingly to each patient needs. Also, other issues were the claustrophobia. A lot of congenital myotonic dystrophy patients have been found to have anxiety when they are found in an enclosed space, and that could be an issue when conducting MRI scans. In some MRI, in some cases, the MRI in the MRI centers, they can also suggest sedation. However, this has to be done with accordance to the anesthetic guidelines in myotonic dystrophy. So other sensitivities have been that we have observed were the anxieties with posture. Some patients had anxiety lying flat on bed, which could also make difficult to provide some assessments such as MRIs or EPS studies, which they need the patients to be lying flat on their back. Many patients had severe anxiety with hospitals, and we try to provide as many clinical visits over the phone or virtual clinics in order to avoid this kind of repeat visits to the hospitals. Other patients that have skin sensitivity and not that doesn't without mentioning allergies. So patients that don't really like leads to be attached on their skin, and they usually rip them off, especially when conducting a sleep study or a 24-hour Holter. Some other a special consideration should be also sought in this place in these cases, but we found that encouragement and patience can help significantly in these situations. So that's what we advise clinicians and all other healthcare personnel to try with this cohort of patients. So there are some difficulties with some, we have found that there are difficulties to perform some clinical assessments due to, for example, spirometry in congenital myotonic dystrophy, and including MIDI and MEP. This is due to both cognitive and physical characteristics of these patients. Which, for example, the patients are required to have a very tight lip seal in order to do the spirometry, and we give them quite complicated instructions, which is very difficult for them to comprehend. For example, for the spirometry, we ask them to take the spirometry tube, put them in the mouth, take a deep breath in, and then breathe out as hard, as fast, and as long as they can. And this, we cannot really break it down in smaller pieces because they have to do it as fast as possible. They have to breathe out as fast as possible. So in many instances, the spirometry are inconclusive in patients with congenital myotonic dystrophy, and in extremely low spirometry values, this should also be considered in patients with congenital myotonic dystrophy, that there is a possibility of them not being able to understand or not being able to form a tight seal around the spirometry tube. Another factor is the manual muscle testing, which patients that cannot comprehend the instructions of the physiotherapist, or they cannot position themselves in the place where they need to do to be able to do the manual muscle testing more precisely. Also, as I mentioned, sleep studies is also challenging to provide to do with provide these patients. However, if the patients can still handle the leads of the sleep studies, but they are scared of coming to the hospital because of the anxiety with hospitals, we can provide. There is the services to provide sleep studies at home, and you should also seek this with your healthcare providers in order to help you with if this is what if this is an issue. MRIs, they can be done under sedations in some cases, if there is a huge clinical need. And difficult venous access, in a lot of patients they have difficult venous access, and this should also be acknowledged. Also, these clinical assessments are also very important for clinical research because all these assessments, they are done also in many clinical trials, and we have already discussed this with many clinical pharmacological companies in order to understand how better to provide these patients with access to treatment and also access to clinical trials in the future. It will be difficult for these patients to come. We have trials that we have to bring the patients at least 10 times a month, and also having infusions for an hour every 4 weeks. In these cases, it will be challenging to most patients to have this kind of treatments, and this should also be considered when we mention that this kind of treatments to this population. So this is a recent table that MDF has provided. This shows the novel approaches in molecular, genetic therapy, and so on, to show promise in addressing the underlying causes and symptoms of myotonic dystrophy type 1. If anyone is interested in any of these clinical trials, please send me an email and I will try to guide you to a relevant clinical trial. However, most of these clinical trials are only applicable for the adult onset of myotonic dystrophy. However, we do have one pharmaceutical company that is working on a drug specifically for congenital myotonic dystrophy. This is called AMO Pharma, and the medicine that they are developing is called tideglosib, also known as AMO-02, which is easier to also prefer. So tideglosib is currently being tested in clinical trials for children and adolescents in with congenital myotonic dystrophy, and as well as childhood onset myotonic dystrophy. It involves oral sachets of tideglosib taken once a day, usually early in the morning or on an empty stomach. So these are the clinical trials that have been either completed or still ongoing in congenital myotonic dystrophy. So the first clinical trial, the AMO-02-MD2001, it was a phase 2 study that has been completed. It was the only site that was involved. It was the Newcastle University. It involved 16 patients of ages of 12 to 45 years, and it involved both congenital and childhood onset myotonic dystrophy patients. So the second one is the REACH-CDM, which is a double-blind trial in phase 2 to 3 in congenital myotonic dystrophy patients. This was a huge multi-center study which involved 56 patients of 6 to 16 years of age. So the open label extensions of this double-blind trial is called the REACH-CDM-X, and is the largest and the longest running interventional study ever conducted in congenital as well as childhood onset myotonic dystrophy. The study has also expanded to include participants with childhood onset DM1 that were not initially included in the REACH-CDM. Of up to 45 years of age, and offers an optional extended access component, allowing patients to continue on long-term therapy. So this is a publication on the phase 2 study of AMO02 that has already been completed. With this phase has showed that so the AMO2 was safe and well tolerated in patients with congenital and childhood onset myotonic dystrophy, meaning people handled it well without needing to stop treatment or change their dose because of side effects. Most patients saw improvements in their cognitive and muscle-related symptoms after 12 weeks of treatment, especially at the higher 1,000 milligrams per day dose. And the amount of AMO02 in the body was also linked to better results in how well the treatment worked. So these are some new updates that the AMO Pharma has agreed to share with me last night. So I hope I hope they are exciting for you. So these are basically some results of the REACH-CDM and the REACH-CDM-X study. So in the REACH-CDM study, there were significant changes between the active group and the placebo group in the secondary endpoint. And the 10-meter walk-run test, participants aged 10 years and older showed little or no decline during the 1-year treatment. There was also significant difference in cognitive function as well as GI symptoms and as well as the multi-domain responder index between active versus control groups. So the AMO02 has a unique mechanism of action in congenital myotonic dystrophy. So I believe everybody knows about the CTG repeats in myotonic dystrophy. The CTG repeats are part of the DNA sequence, while CUG repeats are part of the RNA sequence. The DNA CTG expansion, which is a genetic mutation, is actually the initiating event, but this leads to the expansion in the RNA CUG repeat, which causes directly toxic species responsible for the disease manifestations. So in general, the CTG repeat expansion affects molecules called RNA, resulting in long RNA CUG repeat. And this causes proteins to be made, which are damaging to cells causing the symptoms in myotonic dystrophy. So in AMO02, the AMO02 binds directly on the CUG repeat RNA, which is responsible for the proteins that cause the symptoms, with high potency and high sensitivity. It removes the toxic junk RNA, leaving normal DMPK microRNA transcript intact. That means it doesn't interfere with the normal DMPK gene. This is in other competitor products do not do that, and this is some kind of a unique mechanism of action that AMO02 has proven in various experiments that they have done. So the AMO02 has been generally safe and well tolerated over 4 years of the study. As of September 2025, 44 participants remain on treatment. Most have received AMO02 for more than 3 years. Approximately 15 patients discontinued the treatment, with only one withdrawal due to adverse events, and that was elevated liver enzymes. Most adverse events were mild or moderate, with respiratory infections and gastrointestinal events being the most common. These are consistent with the known natural course of congenital and childhood onset DM1. And participants treated with AMO02 experienced a significantly lower hospitalization rate in comparison to literature and the CureDM survey data that I have shown earlier. No deaths or cardiovascular events have been reported in this study, which is also a significant finding. AMO Pharma has submitted this additional data for AMO02 to the FDA and plans to submit to Health Canada and the MHRA. AMO Pharma has also scheduled to meet with FDA in a few months to discuss the development plan for this drug in the treatment of congenital myotonic dystrophy, including assessments on the use of real-world evidence to support the regulatory submissions, including the CureDM survey mentioned earlier. And also, AMO Pharma has submitted a protocol for a phase 3 study in myotonic dystrophy to the FDA, and hopefully we'll hear some updates soon. AMO Pharma is also planning meetings with UK MHRA and Health Canada to accelerate treatment in this population. So I would like to thank everyone the UCLH DM1 research team and Dr. Chris Turner and all of the other team members, Lakshmi, that most of you might know, Kostas, who is our cardiologist, Ronan Austin, which is a respiratory physician, Matthew Appleby, who is a doctor at the L Wing, that they do all the phase 1, phase 2 studies, Jody, who is also in this meeting, Charlotte, Enza, Shu, and Jose, who are our physiotherapists, and Ikra, who is our clinical coordinator. Also, I would like to thank the CIs of the congenital myotonic dystrophy clinical trials. That's the CIs of the AMO Pharma. That's Professor Hans Lochmuller, Granny Gorman, and Dr. Nicholas Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicoletta. That was a really interesting presentation, and it was really exciting to see that new data from AMO Pharma, which you were able to get for us yesterday. So thank you very much for that. So we've got time for a few questions before we move on to the Living Well session. So again, if anyone has any, they can put some in the Q&A chat. I thought I'd just start by going back to what you were talking about with the natural history studies. I thought it was important how you highlighted the importance of these studies and how the results from these can feed into both clinical care now and have a real world impact, and also go on to influence drug trials in the future. So if someone's not been involved in one of these studies before and is interested in participating in a natural history study, can you give us just a brief kind of overview of what's involved for participants and what the commitment would look like?
So the NDM1, which is the only natural history study that we're running now in the UK, has stopped recruitment, but we're expecting the NDM1 extension to resume in a few months. So this involves, I don't know if, I believe that some of the people in the call, they must be they must have already been enrolled in NDM1. NDM1 included a lot of clinical outcome measures, a lot. That was the whole day. It was quite difficult on the patients. It was quite time consuming. But the NDM1 extensions, because we have the team at VCU and Milan and all the MDCRN network team has reviewed some of the data, and they have and they believe that they have found a few of the most reliable outcome measures. So the visit will not take more than 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, including all the physical assessment, questionnaires, and blood draws, vital signs, and medical history and demographics. So there are only a few outcome measures that will be involved in the NDM1 extension. I do not have the completed protocol, so I cannot really comment. I just saw it in a meeting that we have gone last week. So and it's not have been confirmed 100%. So I really don't want to comment on that, so, as anything can change.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. So you were talking at the end about AMO Pharma's new drug, which is potentially going to help become a treatment for congenital muscular dystrophy, myotonic dystrophy, sorry, we hope. So you mentioned that they're hoping to go into the phase 3 trials, which is kind of the final testing stage. So I'm sure people will be interested in, I guess, rough timelines for how long do phase 3 trials generally last? How long could we expect before a drug potentially reaches the clinic if everything goes well?
So it's difficult to say because, especially with drugs in rare diseases, this can take. It depends from the results that you're going to produce in the initial phases, and how the regulators will consider this data. So we've seen a lot of drugs that have been that they have been approved without having to wait years after phase 3 studies. But this only depends on the results of the studies, and also how well the regulatory organizations are considering this kind of drugs for the population.
Yes, I know it's not always easy to predict because
Yeah.
there's lots of unknowns in this process. So you showed that really useful table with all the different drugs that are currently in development for the different types of myotonic dystrophy. And you mentioned that most of these are primarily targeted at adult onset myotonic dystrophy at the moment. So we know that myotonic dystrophy, all different types, have the same underlying mechanism with this expanded repeat, but with the earlier onsets, you have more repeats generally than in the later onsets. So if some of these drugs are working by targeting these repeats, would we expect that a drug which works in an adult onset might later be shown to also be useful in a congenital population, or is it not as simple as that?
It's not simple as that, but what I can say is that the current medications that we have is most of them phase 1 and phase 2 studies. We have a couple of we have only one well, besides the AMO Pharma, who has completed the phase 2-3 study in congenitals and childhood onset patients. The only drug trial that has tested that is on phase 3 was the Avidity one. The rest are phase 1 and phase 2. So we don't really have any information of how this about the efficacy of this medication. We only can say that these medications are relatively safe to be given to patients. There's still a lot of work. There's a lot of work that is being conducted from many different groups around the world, trying to understand how these drugs can work together or separately in order to make it to accelerate the treatment in this population.
Thank you. Just in terms of perhaps people might be wondering why most of the trials are currently aimed at adults rather than congenital populations. Is that because there's particular difficulties with running trials in congenital patients? Is it safety or outcome measures, for example?
Yeah, it's mostly safety. So it's not only being conducted in adults, it's being conducted in a very small cohort of adults. So these are the patients that they only have myotonia and some muscle weakness. It's for safety reasons mostly, because they don't want to include, we don't know how these medications, the side effects, the extent of the side effects of these medications. We have some indication on animal models, but we don't really know all the side effects that they can happen in human beings. So we currently try to enroll the most not the most healthy of the myotonic dystrophy patients in order to understand if the side effects are part of the medication and not part of their condition, first of all, and also to be able to provide some kind of treatment if there's going to be any adverse event involved with this condition as soon as possible without any severe complication of the condition that can be seen in congenitals and childhood onset.
Great, thank you. I think just one more question before we move on. There's a question in the chat. So you suggested that patients with DM1 should contact you if they're keen to take part in clinical trials. So the first part is whether they can have your email. So I'm sure you're happy.
Yeah, I'm happy to to share it.
And can you also talk briefly about what trials are currently being recruited for? Are there any others apart from the AMO Pharma one that you're involved with?
So the AMO Pharma is not being conducted in the UK. Is now it takes place in Canada, the States, Australia, New Zealand. In the UK, however, we have a lot of clinical trials in myotonic dystrophy, in adult myotonic dystrophy. Currently, we have the Avidity, which has stopped recruitment because they have enrolled all the patients that they needed. And that's the phase 3 study. We have the DYNE that we are currently seeking a lot of patients, and the DYNE study is being conducted in UCLH, in Salford, and also in other places in the UK. So if you have if the patients are not from London, I can still tell them in which site they can go. We have PepGen, which is also a phase 2 study, and also we have Vertex. There are Arthex that is being conducted by St. George's mostly, and a few others in the pipeline. So we have a lot of clinical trials that anybody can, if somebody's interested, they can always contact us and we can try to accommodate. However, as I mentioned, the eligibility criteria in these phase 1 to 2 studies are very, very strict. So so please do not be upset that you're not going to be included. There are some phase 3 studies that are going to start soon, and this will involve a bigger cohort of myotonic dystrophy patients without any such constrictions.
I think you answered a question that we've just had, asking if patients need to hit certain criteria to be able to be eligible for these trials.
Yeah.
So thank you. I think we'll move on to the Living Well session now, because I know we've got a packed agenda. So thank you very much, Nicoletta, and I'll hand back to Neeru to chair the next part of the session.
Thank you, Nicoletta. Thank you, Lorna. So yes, we'll now move on to the Living Well with Congenital Myotonic Dystrophy. So I'm delighted to welcome our 6 panelists today, who will be joining Dr. Nicoletta. Today we're being joined by Dr. Ballantyne, being joined by Dr. Jodie Allen, Dr. Ramdas. If I pronounce any names wrong, I do apologise from the onset. Dr. Jane Hegarty, Peter Ashley, and Nick Emery. And I will come to Peter Ashley first because he's got a few slides to share. But then I'll invite each of our panelists to make a few remarks about their experience of congenital muscular dystrophy and to raise some key points about managing or living well with the condition. And as mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we'll be covering as many questions as possible. So please use the Q&A function as you have been at the bottom of the screen. And please type your questions and comments and we'll try and feed them into the discussion. And like I said, any questions we don't manage to cover, we'll answer them directly after the webinar. So over to you, Peter, to share your slides.
Thanks, Neeru. Hi, everyone. I'm Pete Ashley. I'm the chair and trustee of CureDM UK myotonic dystrophy charity. We support everyone with DM1 and DM2, and have a particular focus on congenital. I'm also a member of the Global DM Community Advisory Board. CureDM are the UK representatives for Eurodymer, Federation of DM support groups, and I'm their representative for the European Reference Network for neuromuscular diseases, and also on various panels with the NHS. But of course, much more important than that is stepfather to Dragan in the picture. He has congenital DM1 and was 26 on Monday, which just happens to be International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day. I'm one of his full-time carers. I was asked to talk about a few key points of the experience of living with the condition. We'll be talking a lot about the problems today, but first, my main experience of congenital myotonic dystrophy is that the kids and adults with CDM are just great. Everyone falls for them. They're fun, they're quirky, all different, yet often have the same interests and similar personalities. They have amazing resilience and an ability to cope with what life throws at them, which with CDM can be a lot. When the families get together at our events, yes, they talk about the challenges, but they also have endless stories of funny things that have happened and amazing things the kids have achieved. Dragan's a big, hairy 26-year-old guy, but in his head, he's around 12 years old, which is kind of fun for us as a family. The CDM kids are exactly that, not just patients, they're kids and should be seen as that. And they're all different. It's impossible to say what kids and adults with CDM will be like. Everyone's different. It's called heterogeneity. Peter Harper, who literally wrote the book on DM some time ago, said it's possibly the most variable condition. There are very long lists of CDM symptoms on the internet, but not everyone will get them all. And we can't predict when most of them will appear. Some don't even have myotonia, which is, of course, the defining characteristic of myotonic dystrophy. Attempting to Google what's going to happen. We've all been there, we've all done that. There are common problems, but in the real world, each person with CDM is an individual and should be seen as such. That said, I've been asked to say a few things about my experience of living with the condition, so a little about Dragan. He should have been diagnosed at birth, all the signs were there, but instead he was labelled with 20 conditions as he grew up. He went through mainstream primary school with help, and then a special school, which he absolutely loved. When he left school, he went to 2 colleges for people with special needs. It's a difficult transition into adult care, and his condition started to deteriorate. Following one very serious hospital admission, a great paediatric neurologist, who's the guy in the middle picture there, diagnosed him on site. CDM actually explained all of his problems, which, whilst really scary, was actually a relief as it gave us something to focus on. Reagan's now 26. He's doing well. He has a better social life than anyone else in the family. He goes to performing arts school for adults with learning difficulties, does crafts, plays games at a hospice, meets with a friend on his iPad every couple of days, plays on his PS5 with his brothers, loves singing, going to the cinema, goes to the theatre, talks endlessly about YouTube and Roblox, and tells the same jokes that he's been telling for 20 years. He enjoys life, and everybody that meets him falls for him. But that, in the real world, takes a lot of work. If you go on to the next picture, that'd be good. I'm still seeing the first picture. There we go. So Dragan takes 8 different meds between 6 AM and 8 PM each day. And we do his observations 3 times a day to make sure we catch his problems early. Has BiPAP overnight, house adaptions, lots of medical equipment, power chair, wheelchair accessible vehicle, and 6 carers 24/7 every day of the year. Those 2 pictures, the medical and care products that we receive every month through the NHS. His main doctors are fantastic. There's one particular one on this call today, at least. But they're 5 hours away in London, which is quite a challenge for us. There's very little locally. In our case, Dragan's needs increased such that both my wife and I had to give up work, and his care and the charity is pretty much all we do all the time now. But we realise we're actually very lucky. And one of the things that makes DM different to most other neuromuscular conditions is that it affects whole families. Usually a severely affected baby explains problems with the parent, grandparents, siblings, cousins. One family that we support has 15 affected family members, which is a real disease burden. At this point, it's worth saying again, we're all different. This is our life experience, but everybody's will be different to everyone else's. Congenital myotonic dystrophy is unpredictable. So what can those of us with CDM in the family do? Next slide, please. The main things, reach out for support. It's good that you're all here. MD UK offer their numerous services, of course, and there are other organisations that are specialists in myotonic dystrophy. At QDM, we offer support for all aspects of living with CDM, including help through education, benefits, adaptions, signposting to medical advice, or just a chat. I have a private moderated Facebook group with over 400 members. And there's the MDSG, which is based in Nottingham. They hold great conferences and good local support meetings. We're working with them now, which I'm pleased to say. And then there's the MDF in the USA, which is a huge myotonic dystrophy organisation. I'm pointing to those because they have some really excellent care guidelines that can be downloaded on the internet for free. It can be very useful, particularly in hospital situations. I'd encourage people to find the experts, like the people on this panel. To be frank, question what your GP and other doctors say, because they're not experts in CDM. It's a very rare condition, and often what would be the right course of action for an unaffected person can be dangerous for us. Myotonic dystrophy comes with fatigue, sleepiness, and apathy. The natural position is to sit at home and play games, so encouraging the kids and the whole family to get out and do things can be hugely beneficial. We organised get-togethers. We took 165 people to Chester Zoo this year, most with CDM in the family. After these events, it's always meeting other people in similar situations, people who understand that people talk about afterwards. This is a large and welcoming CDM community. And finally, I'd just like to touch on hope. We're in a great place at the moment in myotonic dystrophy and also congenital. One of the things I do in the charity is to produce a list of what's coming in terms of medication development. Go on to the next slide, please. Similar to the work that the MDF do, which is what Nicoletta just showed. I found over 50 organisations around the world working on potential treatments. There really is a lot of work going on to help us, and there's a lot of drive to make it happen. If you go on to the next slide, please. There are, as has been mentioned, 11 registered clinical trials, 5 of which are in the UK. As a charity, we're working with 8 of these, companies to make sure they tackle the things that are actually important to us and the people in the myotonic dystrophy community. Nicoletta's already mentioned AMO Pharma, who have a focus on congenital. I'm pleased to say there are also 2 other companies that we were speaking to that have announced that they will be including congenital in their trials going forward in the near future. Medical care is improving all the time with the help of the people here today and others like them. The outlook is good. To the next slide, please. So please reach out. We're still learning about congenital myotonic dystrophy, but medical knowledge and care is improving rapidly, and there's hope for life-changing treatments in the near future, and a lot of support from organisations like ours and the CDM community itself. Being a family with this condition can be difficult and a challenge, but these lovely kids, teenagers and adults with CDM deserve to live their best lives with all our help. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for sharing your personal experience and also access to where you can get information and support, which is so important. And you also highlighted the importance of peer support, so that Facebook community and the other communities are so vital for families and the support that they need going forward. Just to remind you, you can use the Q&A to post questions. And as somebody has just shared a question now, I will just talk through that one before I introduce the other panelists. Okay, so this is from someone who's first time on Zoom and just feeling their way around. So let me just have a look. So she says he has DM1. He is forgetting more and more, not recognizing things, faces, objects. Is this a myotonic dystrophy symptom or dementia? I think this question is quite specific to an individual, but I wonder if anyone would be happy to answer this from a general perspective. And then I would suggest that you go to your specialist to get some further information. Peter.
Okay, I'll have a go at that one.
Thank you.
It's not a crazy question. We go to a lot of conferences in myotonic dystrophy, and I've seen quite a few presentations that liken some of the symptoms to dementia. It's similar in many ways, and I can almost guarantee, obviously, a lot of people get dementia, but it is a common symptom with myotonic dystrophy that you become forgetful. It's related to fatigue and many other things that we work with. But one of the things that we're trying to do in speaking to the companies that are developing treatments is to try to focus on the brain for exactly this reason. Myotonic dystrophy is a physical condition, but it also severely affects the brain, which then leads to the symptoms that you're talking about. So yes, it is likely to be part of the condition, but there are people working on trying to help.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you for Anne for sharing her question and being here on your first webinar. Hopefully you do find it helpful going forward. So if we can move on to the other panelists that have joined us today, I think what I will do is I will just look across my screen and give you an opportunity in turn. So the next person that's on my screen is Dr. Ballantyne. If you just want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about congenital myotonic dystrophy.
Thank you, Neeru. Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Ballantyne. I'm the specialty doctor in clinical genetics at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow. I think I should say from the outset that I look after adults with both types of myotonic dystrophy, so I have no direct interaction with the younger population, their care being provided by the paediatric neurologists in the west of Scotland, as I'm sure it is elsewhere. I think there will be a huge amount of overlap in the general approach to care. So for adults, we're obviously recommending annual reviews, which allow kind of baseline cardiac or heart tests to be updated. So ECGs to be done at these appointments, and some of the recommended blood tests. So we tend to screen, we check for diabetes, we check the thyroid hormone levels, calcium levels, and we look at liver function as well, along with the yearly ECG in adults. And I'm sure it will be very similar in the management of our younger individuals. We would recommend probably heart monitor investigations, and heart scans are undertaken probably around every 3 to 5 years, unless the yearly ECG identifies any abnormalities at all, or there are symptoms which are evident, then we would repeat these investigations much earlier. I think what we will hear a lot about today, I would imagine, is the importance of being looked after or being cared for by a multidisciplinary team. Okay, so not just a geneticist and neurologist, a cardiologist, respiratory physician, but specialist neurophysiotherapists, highly specialised speech and language therapists and occupational therapists, and just part of the wider allied professional team, but specifically those who have a kind of expertise in neuromuscular conditions in general. I think we would all agree that that was a beneficial thing. I suppose just in very broad or very general principles, make sure that you're engaging with the recommended immunisation or vaccination schedules. We've spoken already about the importance of peer support and the support of the various organisations that we've kind of heard about already today. I guess, again, from my perspective in the adult service, I think it's important to look at the transition period from care from the paediatric services and that transition into the adult services, which is sometimes not managed as well as it could be. So I think it's important to begin that process early on. I encourage the kind of younger affected individuals to come along with their parents who are attending my clinics, often from about the age of 14 or so. And at that stage, purely so we can get to know one another. I can introduce myself and they can get used to attending the clinics. I think that's helpful because occasionally the kind of communication is not optimal. So sometimes that transition does not go quite as smoothly. So again, forward planning, I think, is an important part of the care when we're looking at the period from transitioning from care by the paediatric team into the adult team as well. So I'm going to leave it there. There's not much that I can really add because I've got no kind of experience, as I say, directly with the younger population.
Thank you for sharing that and raising some really important points. And with transition, we do find a lot of people coming through to our services and helpline have struggled with that area of work. So we do support where we can. And you touched on peer support, which is vital. We run a peer support network and we launched our new strategy yesterday, our new 10-year vision. A big part of that is volunteering on what that looks like to support the community, because we see that as vital. So thank you for that. So I will now move across to Nick Emery, please.
Apologies for the cat. There wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without a cat in it, so apologies for the cat. Yeah, my name's Nick Emery. I work at the Robert Jones Agnes Hunt Orthopaedic Hospital. I'm a clinical specialist in neuromuscular diseases, and I work with an MDT. And I think that's probably the most important place to start, is that we have an MDT looking after people with myotonic dystrophy, whether that be congenital, childhood or adult. It's essential that you have a well-rounded team, consultant, neurologist, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, care advisor, clinical nurse specialists, psychologists. I can't express how much a psychologist can help, and not only with the person who has DM1, but also the wider family. Siblings who are not affected are affected because of the psychological burden of having a brother or sister. And I don't mean burden in a bad way. I mean the actual difficulty of understanding what's going on. In terms of management, so we have around 95 patients with DM1, right from, I think, around 2 to 3 years old, right through to late adulthood. We're one of the only 2 services which do a seamless service, so we don't have a transition from paediatric to adult. I think one of the most important things we try and do is be predictive. So if we're going to talk about living well with a condition, it's being predictive so that we can put in measures in advance of when they're needed. And this is essential so that people have hoisting at the right time, they have access to a wheelchair at the right time, they have access to orthopedics or orthotics, so that the person with the DM1 has the best opportunity and the best life they can possibly have. It's support in education, it's support with social care, it's support with getting the right benefits. Personal independent payments is a minefield now, and I know I'm should be talking about the physical therapy side of things, but I think it's much broader than that, especially when you're dealing with a multi-systemic condition. There's also the burden of socioeconomic status. So if you have a DM1, you're more than likely to be from a lower socioeconomic status. So in other words, you don't have so much money, and that affects you greatly in terms of health outcomes. That's well researched. In terms of the physical side of things, it's if it's congenital, we will monitor contractures, we will monitor if they've got talipes, so that's the inturned feet, we will get treatment for that, Ponseti treatment. We have an excellent orthopedic surgeon who has Ponseti clinics. We can then supply splints. It's managing, as I said, contractures, but it's also encouraging function. So little basic things you can do to manage function. It's good seating, it's respiratory care, it's feeding, essential things that we should all be looking at, but often we don't. And to go back to transition, we always get a little bit, put ourselves in a bucket of it's a medical transition. It's a transition when they transition from junior school to senior school. It's a transition when they leave school to go to college. It's a transition if they go on to work or further education. They're all transitions, and throughout that entire time they need support. It's a transition if you're walking and you become non-ambulant. That's a transition. And so they're essential parts of a life. It's not just a medical, oh, we're moving you from paediatric cardiology to adult cardiology. And we are lucky we have a transition nurse who's fantastic and does a lot of that work for us. We also do multidisciplinary clinics where you have cardiologists in clinic alongside the MDT, look after them. And then we do respiratory clinics as well, where we have respiratory consultant who looks after the respiratory side of things. As Dr. Ballantyne mentioned, it's essential that they have regular reviews. We try and review on need rather than having a set date. So it won't be a year, it'll be, oh, we might see you in 3 months' time because you're struggling. If we can, we're extremely busy. But then it's making sure that their needs are met to the best of our ability, and it's encouraging things like activity. It's encouraging good diet. It's looking at poor habits in terms of smoking and drinking. Lots of the patients we see tend to smoke and have a poor diet. Alcohol consumption tends to be a little bit higher in the patients we see. So it's trying to encourage that side of things. and trying to make sure that they realise that they are detrimental to health. And as I say, it's really important just to give them the encouragement that they can go and do a little bit of exercise, whether that's congenital, and you can do lots of things. We've got hydrotherapy pool, we're very lucky to have. It's also access to orthotics, as I said, but also encouraging that little bit of extra activity. So I'll leave it there, and if there's any questions on that, I'm more than happy to field them.
Thank you, Nick, for sharing both clinical and practical elements of living with the condition, and also a very holistic approach to everything that's needed with such a complex condition. Thank you, and I'm sure there will be some questions a bit later. So now I'm going to hand over to Dr. Sitara Ramdas just to share some of her thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Neeru, and it's lovely to be here this afternoon. So I'm Sitara Ramdas. I'm a pediatric neurologist, and I lead the muscle service here. So as you've heard already with the previous panelists, the management of muscle conditions, including myotonic dystrophy, congenital, childhood, or adult onset, is within a multidisciplinary team. And that's what we have. That's a crucial part of their management. So my experience as a pediatrician, I've diagnosed babies in the neonatal unit, and not so uncommonly then diagnose their parents because their parents have been undiagnosed. So we've had those journeys, and then we have patients like Pete, your son, who had symptoms clearly from very early on, but didn't get diagnosed in later part of childhood, and then the others who come with the typical childhood onset myotonic dystrophy. I think the important thing to consider, which was something that was mentioned particularly, is the cognitive involvement that our patients have, particularly the congenital onset myotonic dystrophies. It's quite significant, and supporting them in the right educational settings, in addition to the medical issues, is really important. But also the ones who may not have significant learning difficulties. Autism is the autistic spectrum disorder is quite common in our children, young people, myotonic dystrophy, and even the later childhood onset might have those ASD traits and things which have not been really picked up. So actually supporting getting the diagnosis of myotonic dystrophy then helps them access those sort of assessments and things, and that really helps supporting them in educational settings and things. And that's really important to explore those, because they may not be that obvious or had not recognized by professionals, and including sometimes families, that there are these subtle social communication difficulties. Medication is one part of the treatment, but actually there's lots of other aspects of the treatment, supporting education, supporting the right equipment, and regular reviews is something that we do provide. But as has already been mentioned, transition is really crucial, and working together well with your adult colleagues to make sure that smooth transition is there. And one of the other things I think really important is we do have adults with myotonic dystrophy who do have significant learning difficulties, who then have children also with similar. So making sure sometimes you have a family who need the entire support and not just a child, because with the nature of the condition. So working together with the adult colleagues to make sure the entire family is supported, both the parent and the children, and that can that's not uncommon with myotonic dystrophy compared to our other muscle conditions. I think it really is making sure the children can get unwell, making sure the clinicians look after them when they come to ICU, things like that, are aware of the condition, the cardiac aspects, the respiratory aspects, and monitor that closely, and really just, support them. That's there. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. I'm sure there will be some questions in a moment. I think a lot of you have talked about all the practical needs and support that people need. Muscular Dystrophy UK does have a support and advocacy service, and we support with exactly things like that, in terms of whether you're struggling in education, whether it's accessing it, getting plan in place. Welfare benefits, DLA and PIP are sometimes quite difficult, and it's sometimes disheartening for patients and families because they end up talking about all the things they can't do or struggle with. So it's a difficult place to be, and we do offer also the Teapot Trust. We offer some art therapy training, probably therapy support, sorry, not training, probably not appropriate for everybody, but there may be some children that would benefit from that. And then we offer therapeutic support groups with trained counsellors that run group sessions. So we find that helps as well. So I'm going to now move across to Dr. Jodie Allen, please.
Thank you, Neeru. My name's Jodie. I'm a speech and language therapist by background, and I specialise in neuromuscular conditions. And I have to say, I really enjoy working with our congenital DM1 patients. And I'm sad to say that I only ever get to see them once or maybe twice a year at best, because I'm based in a hospital where our congenital adult patients come through for all of their multidisciplinary testing. Now, I work really closely with community colleagues, and I have to say our congenital patients are much better served in their own homes and in schools to meet their learning needs, often because of the associated learning disability or autism. And it's fair to say, I think, that the speech and language therapy remit is really stretched when we're working with this patient group, because often we're looking at eating, drinking, feeding, communication, learning, drooling. So there's lots and lots of areas that we cover as speech and language therapists to support our patients living with congenital myotonic dystrophy. Some of our patients come to us in adults and they already have gastrostomies to support their nutrition. And our role as speech and language therapists is to help people continue to live as normal life as possible, enjoying meal times if they can. So we know that swallowing is affected in myotonic dystrophy, more so often in congenital myotonic dystrophy, but meal times are a big part of our days, aren't they? And we really want these children to live and experience meal times in the same way that everybody else does, regardless of their feeding and swallowing problems. And of course, we need these children to be able to communicate in the best possible way, because that is, again, so integral to every experience, including education, including talking to families and their siblings. And I have really enjoyed learning Makaton from the young adults that come through our centres. But the speech therapists who are based in schools are those people who will be setting up those systems. Some of our patients, and we've talked already this afternoon about the heterogeneity, some of our patients with myotonic dystrophy congenital can communicate very well and don't need any supportive communication systems. But it's also really important for us as professionals and family members and friends to know how to communicate best with somebody with congenital myotonic dystrophy, because if they don't understand what's happening to them, it makes much more challenging to access hospital appointments and participate and keep well. Even simple things like brushing your teeth in the morning, understanding why that's important, how that can prevent chest infections. So we see our role as speech and language therapists as much more holistic with this patient group, because like I say, eating, drinking and communication is such a big part of our days. And so you will probably see the speech therapist bobbing in and out of schools or in and out of homes throughout their childhood, or at least I hope so. And if that isn't the case, please make sure that you are accessing that if your child does have any speech, feeding or communication difficulties. And I will keep it short and sweet.
Thanks, Jodie. We have had a couple of questions in advance relating to feeding, eating and that side of things, but I'll come to that in a moment. I don't want to leave Dr. I am not pronouncing your name correctly, so do correct me and introduce yourself. But last but not least, we'll come over to you, Jane.
I got a feeling that when you mentioned that it was my name that you were. I've had
Sorry.
it since I was a young child. It's not a problem. It's Jane Herity. I'm a paediatric respiratory consultant at the Evelina Children's Hospital. So I look after the respiratory aspects of a number of patients with congenital myotonic dystrophy, and some of my more complicated patients have been congenitally affected, their tracheostomy ventilated, and have been for a number of years. And I think one of the more complicated patients I've had and that I've looked after through her whole childhood, is about 8 years old now. And having been 24-hour ventilated at birth, she has gradually weaning off ventilation. So first weaned off the ventilation in the day, and then weaned off ventilation overnight. And we bit the bullet and we've stopped it overnight just before the winter, because we just needed to do it eventually and see how it went. So she has improved over time. We're waiting to see how long this winter, how we manage. And her mother's affected, and therefore, I've got a child with a machine that alarms all night. And yes, there is a care package in place, but at times care packages fail. And I have got a child who is got more care needs than the vast majority of children, with a mum who's restricted on how much of that care she can do. So it is, a huge need there. And whatever care packages we put in place for families like this, carers ring in sick and you're left to your own devices. So it can be really tricky. For the older patients, I suppose I think about, because she was picked up at birth, and therefore the screening is part of her standard care. I think for our older patients, I sort of break it down into sort of areas where we can keep an eye on things. So first of all, will always be chest infections, and we want to know about patients that are getting more than 1 or 2 chest infections over a winter period, needing antibiotics for more than a week. I kind of feel like a little bit, if you're less than that or only just at that point, people that aren't very keen, or children aren't very keen on doing therapy exercises and things on a daily basis for something that affects them for 4 or 5 days in a year, that you're just not going to get buy-in, and nobody will be doing it when they need to. But the patients that we really want to know about are the patients that have managed to get themselves into hospital with chest infections, or have had a course of antibiotics for a week and still aren't getting better at the end of it, or there's a problem 1 month and then the next month they're getting the same problem again. And our physios have got a range of things they can do to make things better, but we need to know. And I might screen a patient once a year or once every 2 years for those that are really well, but we need those patients we call them red flags, call us in between to say, this isn't going quite as well as planned. Things that are important are part of what the speech and language therapist just said. If you are aspirating your liquids into your lungs, and liquids are tricky things, they run everywhere at speed. And if you aren't swallowing as well as you were previously, or fatigue as you're eating, then aspiration is a big concern. So we will work with our speech and language therapist to see if that is the cause of the recurrent chest infections, or just not having the strength to cough and clear something when it comes along. So often those are the sort of regular, and what you're looking for is patients that sort of do a quick throat clear every time they have a drink, and you think, that's new, that's different, or don't seem to clear it. And often patients will have silent aspiration, so they're not really showing signs of aspirating things. They're just getting more chest infections than you would expect for the other level of weakness, and it means that we go on a bit of a hunt. Vaccination programs have been brought up, and it really is essential. So there is a national flu vaccination program from when you're 2 to when you're 16. That is for every child. But there's been a very big, I think the sort of anti-vax around COVID meant that people have then questioned all the other vaccines that you get routinely each year. But I would be recommending our standard national vaccination program, but for this group of patients is more important, and family members around those, because you're more likely to catch flu if there's another person in your house that's got flu that's going to make you ill. So making sure we do the basic standard normal things, but really encouraging them and promoting why that they are important in every consultation, to make sure if people have got vaccine concerns, we can talk them through. But I would hate for someone's information about vaccination to be coming off of social media only and not having had an opportunity to talk through that with a healthcare professional. People are, you know, everyone can abstain from vaccination. That's not a problem, but I'd want them to be doing that on a good background of information. And then the next bit is a sort of sleep assessment. So sleep is essential for children, and as people have alluded to, for children who like being on computer devices late into the evenings, chatting to peer groups, they often are going to bed at ridiculous times, especially our teenagers, and encouraging good bedtimes and devices and IT equipment all being turned off and out of bedrooms an hour before bedtime is a hard sell to every family with a teenager in it. But for this group of patients, they need to be going to sleep at an appropriate time. But then the difficulty is with when there's a problem with your breathing and you're vulnerable overnight, the gas exchange often can lead to raised carbon dioxide levels, and that presents itself to not wanting to get up in the morning, feeling headachy and sick, being a bit more moody, dozing off or not concentrating in maths. But also those are the signs of being a teenager. So a lot of our teenagers will not want to get up until the very last second because they went to bed slightly too late. They are grumpy in the mornings and just bite everyone's head off normally. They've got mood swings because their hormones are going all over the place. So often it's really tricky to pull out signs of sleep disorder breathing and being a teenager. And I think sometimes, you know, doing sleep studies is the only way we can sort of reside ourselves to whether this is normal teenage behavior or whether this is abnormal breathing at night, making someone have more symptoms during the day. And so screening people, and I heard it mentioned about the fear of hospitals and the sensitivity of the leads. We can do home sleep studies. Many centres will be able to do home sleep studies. But also we can send out dummy leads to families that aren't attached to the equipment so that they can practice putting them on before the night of the sleep study. So you've kind of had a desensitization to the thing that's strange or got to be stuck to you. So you get used to it. And we have to do that with many children with autism and behavioural difficulties for whatever reason. So if we're alerted to that ahead of time, we can stave off sending a whole load of sleep equipment that a family can't get near to a family with. If you just raise that it could be an issue, then we can send out stuff ahead of time so that people have been desensitized. One of the things was mentioned was about weight gain. If your weight is a problem, eventually it has a major impact on your respiratory muscles, and you get sudden deteriorations in respiratory function and in your cough strength and in your sleep disorder breathing. I've seen that in a lot of children with all sorts of muscular dystrophies, because their weight sort of sits low and that seems to be okay, and then they seem to drift off the bottom of the charts, and then you have a sudden fall in what had been previously good respiratory function. So you want to make sure your weight's on a growth chart somewhere and you're tracking along, and nutrition's really important. And then the only other thing to say is children with all sorts of neuromuscular conditions also can have normal childhood things. So I've been caught out by children with spinal muscular atrophy who've also got asthma. And it's making sure that we have done the basics of taking that history again and again to make sure you don't miss someone. And so one of my patients who was recurrently presenting with chest infections, and I was blaming their muscle weakness, actually an asthma inhaler made all the difference. So it's just having that mindset that common things are common, and asthma is common in our population. And so some children will have more than one diagnosis, and it's on us to pick that up when something doesn't fit our normal standard patterns.
Oh, thank you. Some really important information you've shared, and the fact that every individual's different, signs to look out for. So no, really, really helpful. Thank you for that. So we have had a few questions in the chat, which I will come to first, and then I will move across to some advanced questions if we don't have any more questions in the chat. So somebody called Pip, this is a speech and language question. So she says her speech and language therapist keeps trying to discharge them, though her 6-year-old uses a Macaton attempts to use an AAC device, is non-verbal and has swallowing difficulties, so is nil by mouth and tube fed. He consistently chews things, especially material, and we now have bibs on him to chew, but are having to replace them because he eats them. And then there's also some more information here. On his last G-tube change, they drew out a lot of black stuff from his stomach. It wasn't congealed blood, it was black material from his bib. And then she feels like she's constantly asking for advice that they don't have. And she's pushing them to be concerned with his communication, sensory, and oral experiences, but she's just a bit lost on what to do next.
That sounds like a question for me, maybe.
Yes, I think so.
Well, I'm sorry to hear you're having challenges, Pip, having access to the speech and language therapy team. I'm always really careful on these webinars about talking too much about really the best practice, because we have to balance that with what the NHS, unfortunately, can provide. And I often hear when people come to our centre, we can't get hold of the speech and language therapist, or there's not enough speech and language therapists. And your story kind of echoes that, and that's a real challenge for everybody. What I will say is, if it might be that they don't have the service provision. But the other one is that, lots of speech and language therapists work in lots of different areas, and not everybody is as lucky as I am to sit in a very specialist centre. So if speech and language therapists are out in the community and working, for example, with congenital DM1, they may have never worked with that condition before. So we do encourage speech and language therapists out in local areas, smaller hospitals, smaller communities, to touch base with the tertiary centres, because they might be able to offer some ideas about how to manage the chewing, for example, and other ways that we can support the child. The other thing is, and I think it kind of answers the second question to some extent as well, is that speech and language therapists don't just work with the child. They more often or not will work with teachers and parents and families. And it's often the family, because we're so restricted, that often implements all of the advice and the therapy. So maybe it's about working out what the speech therapist can teach you to do with your child as well, which possibly is the same as that second question about somebody not wanting to go and see a speech therapist. Do you know what? I wouldn't blame them. It's scary, isn't it, going into a hospital or a clinic to go and see an adult you've never met before. But speech therapists do go out into schools and into homes, and I've said that before, but actually it might be that the speech therapist spends a little bit of time with you as the parent, working out how you can work with your child a little bit more successfully with their communication. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Jodie. And it sounds like you've answered the second question as well with one of our anonymous attendees in terms of the reluctance to see a speech and language therapist. So thank you for that. We have another question in the Q&A. This may be from an adult or an older child, a parent, I'm not 100% sure, but let's just get it answered anyway. So I have DM1 and don't have issues with breathing at night or when sleeping, but I don't sleep well, maybe 2 or 3 hours. Would this be a GP issue or could it be associated? I have tried almost everything you can think of to address this. So Jane, is this one for you, perhaps? Sorry, you're on mute.
So from a sleep hygiene is what they call it point of view, they're the important things to address first of all, because making sure those are sort of addressed, and it is tricky. So not having any IT devices in your bedroom at all. They all emit a blue light that stops your own body's natural melatonin being released, and therefore going off to sleep can be tricky. So making sure that an hour before you want to be asleep, those things are all removed from your vision. And then doing things that it's probably where historically our mothers would always bath babies before bedtime. But if you warm someone up and as you cool, you're more likely to go off to sleep. So having a warm shower or a warm bath before bedtime or a warm drink all raise your own temperature. And as your body temperature goes down, you can then go off to sleep. So that's where historically that sort of warm milk and a warm shower or bath before bedtimes come from. Anecdotally, that's how it works. So making sure those things are addressed first of all, and that you've got a regular bedtime. So if you're going off to sleep at midnight, you can't suddenly go to bed at 10 o'clock. Moving things back by about 15 minutes of the time you want to go off to sleep each week, and gradually trying to get it back to a better time. That said, I suspect the underlying conditions do have some bearing on your sleep, and I'm going to bounce that then back to the neurologists. If you've not got sleep disorder breathing and you've done all the sleep hygiene stuff, I would land it very much with the neurologist to answer.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I agree completely with Jane. I think what's been said about certainly with our children and young people, I think making sure there's no sleep disorder breathing, sleep hygiene, but also I think thinking particularly about our children with congenital myotonic dystrophy who've got significant learning difficulties. It's quite common that these children don't have the sleep cycle, the wake sleep cycle as regulated as our developmentally normal children. So again, getting back to that pattern of things is important. Our children, particularly and young people who have neurodiversity, autistic spectrum disorder, again, sleep onset can be an issue. So sometimes things like melatonin can be helpful. They're not sedating, but equally it's not going to keep you asleep. So having a discussion with your clinical team of what that might be, there might be options to consider. But yeah, sleep hygiene is the most important.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, with the DM1s, it's often they get daytime somnolence, so they need to take a nap in the day. And if you do, it's making sure that that is not after sort of 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because that'll disturb your sleep overnight. And the other point is looking at whether your sleeping habits have changed, whether you used to sleep with 1 pillow and now you can't sleep unless you've got 3 pillows, because that might indicate that you are more upright, so your breathing muscles work better the more upright you are, because gravity's not having to work, gravity's helping you. So that's a question that we often ask. Do you wake with an early morning headache? No, but has your sleeping pattern changed? Are you using more pillows? Yes, I'm using 3 pillows now. That would indicate maybe something's going on with the respiratory system overnight.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful. So we've got a little bit of time left. I've got a few questions that were sent to us in advance. If I can just touch on those quickly. So we've talked about some of this already, but I don't know whether any of you would have anything else to add to this. What are some of the most common challenges families face when caring for a child with congenital myotonic dystrophy, and how can they be best supported? I think we have talked a lot about this. If anyone has anything else to add to that. And I'm just looking across my...
Yeah, I'm just going to say it's early access to equipment probably is one of the biggest challenges you probably face. Is, it's like I said, if it's non-ambulant, you might need hoisting. It's making sure those are put in place. It's getting the grants for housing adaptations, ramps in and out the house for wheelchairs. Those can be a bit of a minefield. Access to wheelchair services can be difficult. They're extremely busy, underfunded, so they have limited access. I think Peter's probably more the person to answer.
Yeah, Peter has his hand up. Just on that topic you've raised about equipment and wheelchairs, it is a difficult space to be in. The NHS haven't got the funding. There's postcode lotteries across the country. We as an organisation provide grants. There are other organisations that we work jointly with. So we work jointly with WizKids who offer grants for children. So there is stuff available out there, but it is definitely an issue, and it will be something we'll be tackling going forward through our new strategy in terms of campaigning as well as providing more funding. But can we come to you, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are many challenges looking after a child with congenital, but for me, the biggest challenge is finding doctors and specialist support agencies that actually know what they're talking about when it comes to even myotonic dystrophy, but particularly congenital. It is pretty rare. There aren't that many people with congenital in the UK or elsewhere in the world, so you can probably not expect people to know much about it. But the danger is if you get advice that's contrary to what you should be doing, or getting a referral to somebody that understands. So the people on this call, all very knowledgeable. So I would encourage people to try and find people that have a good reputation, work in the good centres, go to seminars, talk to people that are presenting, because they're likely to be the ones that are more knowledgeable on what to do. But I was going to mention it later. I would give a shout out to the MDUK neuromuscular care advisors, because I worked with a few of them, and in my family particularly, we worked with one for 10 years, and they transformed Dragon's Care. Attended the HCP meetings at school, signposted to specialists through doctors, got around this problem of trying to find somebody that knows what they're talking about in a medical situation. Helped with house adaptions even. We were struggling to get across what we needed to the council for house adaptions, even using the MDUK guide, which is great. And our new neuromuscular care advisor came along and helped with that, got us some hydrotherapy. So I know they do vary, but I would encourage people to reach out to find a neuromuscular care advisor, because it's certainly been a boost for our family.
That's really great to hear about the neuromuscular care advisors. And for those that don't know, they are based in neuromuscular specialist centres. Not all services have a care advisor. So if you do find that a care advisor isn't available, do contact our helpline and we can see what areas we can support with. But yeah, the care advisors, some of them come from clinical backgrounds, social care backgrounds, and they can really support to coordinate care when you have so many multidisciplinary teams and services that you need to work with. And when obstacles come along, like getting access to equipment, benefits, education, and housing is a massive area that takes a long time to get houses adapted. So I am just going to finish with a comment in the Q&A, and then I do have one last question. So Rob has commented in the Q&A, as a parent of an 18-year-old daughter with CMD, and he wanted to share his experience in relation to financial impact and the importance of planning ahead. So he's a financial advisor, and there can be significant issues if there is a lack of capacity when the child reaches 18, especially if there are other assets outside of state benefits, such as junior ISAs, trust funds, etc. And the ability not to be able to access those funds. So its mental capacity is definitely an issue sometimes. And he talks about a lasting power of attorney to be put in place. And he also talks about it's essential that as parents and grandparents, there is a need to ensure to support someone who is classed as vulnerable. So yeah, some really good advice there. So I am just going to finish with one last question, and it was to do with physiotherapy and muscle strength. So how can people with CMD maintain mobility and muscle strength over time? And what role do physiotherapists and exercise play? I'm going to come to you, Nick.
Thought you would.
Of course.
Right, I'm always going to be a bit woolly on this. The research is poor. There's not much out there. I'm a great advocate for any, and I'm not going to use the word activity rather than exercise. So anything you can do that's more than your baseline. So if you're only walking around the room, if you walk around the room twice, you've increased your activity by 100%. So it's doing little and often. You can do gentle weighted exercise. You can do aerobic exercise, which would be getting your heart and lungs working a little bit harder. So an exercise bike, if able, is good. The caveats to that, the warnings to that are making sure that you've had a cardiac screen. So you've seen a cardiologist, you've had your echo, you've had your ECG. They're happy for you to do some form of exercise because exercise increases heart rate. And as we know, DM1 have an issue with heart arrhythmias. If you are doing some exercise to get slightly out of breath when you're exercising is fine. You should maybe feel a little bit of fatigue in your muscles, but no pain. If you're feeling a little bit of pain, that's not necessarily dangerous, but it just means that's your upper limit. So you know how much you're doing. Hydrotherapy is brilliant, but access to hydrotherapy pools is limited. And also going down the respiratory side of hydrotherapy, we've got to make sure that people have a safe airway, because there's no good going into a hydrotherapy pool and you aspirating on the pool water, because that's not going to be great. I think in terms of maintaining muscle strength and ability to be able to walk, it's doing little and often. And not being too worried about getting a little bit of aching in your muscle, because that just shows you're getting adaptation. Your muscles are doing a little bit more than you've asked them to do in the past. And that's quite scary for people. Oh, I don't know, I don't like this feeling of my muscles aching, so I'm not going to do it. Actually, that's possibly a good thing. But as I say, no pain when you're exercising. And if you do, don't panic. It's probably just you've done a tiny little bit too much. There's no hard and fast rules. Little bit, even as little as 5 minutes a day broken up into 2 to 3 minute blocks is enough, and then you can gradually build on it as you get more confident. I think that's the basics. It's very difficult to be prescriptive unless you actually see the person in front of you and say, oh, you can do this or you can do that.
Yeah.
I hope that's answered the question.
That's been really helpful, Nick. Thank you. So as we come to the end of today's session, someone has their hand up. I do apologise. Peter, very quickly.
Yeah, sorry. I agree with everything Nick said. When we first started, we were told not to do exercise because you have a neuromuscular condition and it will damage the muscles. There's lots of evidence to show that that's not the case, and little and often is good. Just from our perspective, one of the things that really worked for us was dancing.
Okay.
So we saw a physiotherapist. We asked Dragan what he was interested in. He likes music, he likes dancing. So we actually had a physiotherapy plan from the NHS that included dancing. So as with all of us, whatever you're interested in, you're more likely to do it. So
yeah, no, that's common with somebody who doesn't have CMD as well, isn't it? Thank you, Peter. So I am now going to bring today's session to an end. I want to say a huge thank you to all our speakers for sharing their time and expertise, and a big thank you to you all as well, so all the attendees, for your questions, comments, and engagement throughout the session. The recording of this webinar, along with the series, will be available on MD UK's YouTube channel very soon, probably early next week, I would suggest. We'll also be sending out a brief feedback survey. We'd really appreciate any feedback so we can change and develop and improve future events. And finally, just a reminder that today's session provides valuable information. It does not replace advice from your healthcare team. If you have specific concerns or questions about your health or care, we'd encourage you to speak to your neuromuscular specialist or clinical team. So thank you all again for joining us today, and I hope you found it useful and informative. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.